So, good morning, everyone. I am Shoaib from NTT Data. We are basically kind of a big Japanese giant, old telco company moving towards the data stuff. And we definitely do have a very big healthcare division here in Spain and Portugal. Meanwhile, I'm just traveling a long way back from Luxembourg here. And I worked there as a senior health data architect. Before that, I was a postdoctoral fellow at University of Luxembourg, and before that, I was in South Korea. So I have kind of a taste from both East and West when it comes to the data. So what is easy and what is difficult. But just to let you know a little bit here, NTT Data Luxembourg basically entered into healthcare market right in between COVID. And then since then, we are having different projects in the healthcare domain. It's with strange in Luxembourg because it was known basically as a healthcare, as a banking hub previously. But now the government has shifted actually to make it a data economy. So they are investing pretty much a lot over there. So we are having different projects. We are working with the research institutes. We are working in the healthcare sectors like with the hospitals. We are working with the one and only university in Luxembourg. And basically, we are working with the patients' organizations and the care hosts like Sita Senior, etc. So, yeah, so that's the crux of today's presentation. Yesterday, we had kind of a news, okay, there would be some relief but for China, but we are seeing basically a trade war between US and the rest of the world being a giant. So everyone is pushing the rope towards themselves. So now, why this is important for us to understand is like before this session, there was a very fantastic talk about agentic AI, and agentic AI needs data. So agents needs the data. Without data, they would be useless. So what if Europe makes a lot of agents on the US data, and then you don't have basically access to the data? Or imagine if China comes, who has a lot of data, and they make a better agents because they don't have a control. They don't have to apply like this data sovereignty or something like that in China. So how can we balance these stuffs, and what Europe is doing basically to balance this stuff? On the one hand, we have to develop the agents, and on the other hand, we definitely have to protect the data sovereignty. We have to protect the European values of humans. So yeah, so these are the major basically things when it comes to the data sovereignty. I'm sorry, I'll take it here. Yeah. So when you talk about the data sovereignty, we talk about the controls, like the human, like the data subjects who is actually owning, have a control over the data. So even if I want to give my data to some agents, I should be able to do it. If I don't want, I shouldn't be. You need to convince me, you need to convince a data subject that my data in hands of your agent will be safe and will be treated in a proper way and will not be misused against this. It just reminds me of a story back when I was in Korea. In Korea, they have a lot of basically tightening over the data and immigrations. So when it comes to the COVID, now, if you go to the vaccination center to get the vaccination, there was a problem because illegal immigrants will not go there because they will be caught by the police. Okay, fantastic. Now what to do? The government has to pass a law that when you go to basically vaccination center or a COVID testing center, no ID card requires. You go there or you do that. So we have a control over there, and then we have basically the localization of the data. My data should be stored basically according to the law where I am the citizen of. For example, if I am a Luxembourg resident, I would be preferring actually to have a Luxembourg law apply to my data, because then if anything wrong goes away, I'll be actually able to manage in the judiciary or in the courts very easily. But if my data being a Luxembourg resident is under the US code, so under the US law, or under the Chinese law even, then it can be, the situation can be catastrophic for us. So these are some of the basically data sovereignty controls, control things that we need to take off, we need to balance the things. On the one hand, basically, we need to ensure that the data is available for research and the data is available for R&D purposes. On the other hand, we also need to make sure that the data that researchers are being used, that the researchers are using, are basically controlled in a proper way. And they are not misuse on the data so that the data subject has a trust on what basically is being done on their, with their data. So these are some of the basically 6 pillars that I basically list them as basically main pillar of the data sovereignty, what you need basically in order to achieve the data sovereignty. So 3 major are basically the technical, the social, and the legal. So rest are basically, rest can be classified as their byproducts. So there must be technical means in order to enable basically the data sovereignty. And there must be basically legal grounds, because if at some stage the technical grounds fail, then the data must be protected by the legal grounds. And then definitely we need to have a social agreement for sharing our data, because if we don't have a social agreement, for example, here we talk about the healthcare, we need to have actually a social dialogue or a social agreement with the patients that we will be able to actually access their data. We as a researcher can promise, okay, we'll use your data in orderly fashion as your will, but you will then be actually more open to providing your data. Because if patients can opt out of the data sharing, you cannot have access to the data. So there's only one way to make that. And then we share, okay, we have this technical infrastructure that basically we like to hold there. So now we go, okay, what are basically legal and policy frameworks that are needed when basically it comes to the data sharing, what you need. We need basically definitely the legislations that are there. We are having a lot of legislations now for the data. We have a Data Governance Act, we have a Data Act, we have AR Act, we have a European Health Data Space Act. And all those acts are basically the legal frameworks that is being provided to us. Now, when it comes to the data sharing, we are having another problem at the moment, and that is basically the agreement of the data sharing. There is a lot of problems definitely at the moment when it comes to the data sharing for the secondary use between different institutes. So the Commission is basically working on a unified data sharing template that I think we need to have that. That is one of the bottlenecks at the moment that I explored. Then we come to basically the technical enablers that can enable the data sovereignty. So these are basically the 4 ones that I have listed. There can be a little more, little less as well. So the federated data architecture. So the data sharing architecture should not be centralized with a joint. It should be basically federated so that the data subjects feel comfortable that your data is not with a one main giant like Microsoft or like Amazon. They are not holding your data, but your data is basically federated among the different entities, and they are basically obliged. Or even when it comes to the very narrow down, all the data can be stored on the mobile phones. So I am storing my data by myself, and I'm just sharing it for some specific purpose. So these are technical enablers needs to be there. And then it comes to basically the secure data transfer or secure data enablement. So when I share the data with you, or the patient shares the data, the data is not shared indefinitely. The data has to be shared basically on some time being, for some purpose, for a time being. So we need a technical enablers to ensure, and the secure processing environment in Europe is this for that actually. And then we need to basically have a collaboration among each other we need to have a confidence on each other that basically the systems on which to which we are providing the data, or the agents to which we are giving the data, has some level of a certification on which we can believe in confidence. And finally, we should have basically the privacy and privacy protection and tracking that who is using the data. So the technical infrastructure should enable the tracking so that the data holder can know that, okay, who is using their data at what time. That we can call auditing as well. So then it comes to basically data ethics and accountability. So in order to have a efficient data sharing, accountability is a must, so that we can make sure that the data holder cannot falsifically or with the ill intention use the data. And if it use the data for some ill intention purposes, then there is a way actually to track it. For that, we have basically we should have basically the auditability function in our basically data sharing mechanism or the data spaces that we're gonna discuss later. So in Europe, this was all about basically what the data sovereignty is and what we need to basically do to achieve it. Now, in Europe, we are definitely having a lot of projects. Those are focusing on the healthcare, and they are basically focusing on data sovereignty. We have basically data space support centers. We have International Data Space Association. There are Gaia X is another initiative that basically is focusing on data sovereignty. And to European project, basically, IGERA is a project that is sponsored by the that has been sponsored by the European Commission, and it is basically focused on developing the technical and the legal infrastructure. And the last project that I will be talking about is Data Space for Health, actually, that was sponsored by co-sponsored by the Luxembourgish government to actually enable the healthcare data economy. So, before I go, I just would like to say basically NTT has a wide background, and it has basically a wide portfolio when it comes to the data spaces. Our teams in Japan and in basically Spain and Luxembourg, we are working on basically developing the technical infrastructure across to enable the data spaces so that we can enable the data sovereignty. So, when you come to basically the Luxembourgish ecosystem, that's where I like to focus the rest of my presentation. We have these actors there. So mainly we have three kind of actors. We have the research institutes, the private companies, we have the governmental institutes, and then we have the hospitals. So what I like to do is basically, we like to put them together in one table. So we'll ask them to sit on one table and basically see what we can achieve together when it comes to the data sovereignty in the healthcare. Because the research institutes needs the data, hospitals hold the data, university researchers needs to build the chatbots, the healthcare guys needs to do the analysis, and private companies has to basically commercialize what universities are building. So this comes basically the birth of a data space for health in 2024. The NTT actually and Ministry of Economy together took an initiative to put all those stakeholders together to develop a technical infrastructure on two different use cases. So this is basically our ecosystem of data space for health. It is so you can see basically we are basically the technical enabler in the project that is basically overseen by Ministry of Health and Luxembourgish National Data Service. On the left hand, you can see basically the healthcare providers who are holding the healthcare data, and on the right hand, you can see basically the researchers who are basically consuming the data. So what you like to build is a railroad that can basically take data from left to right. Actually, on my screen, it's left to right. If it is opposite for you, I'm sorry. Yeah. So in healthcare data, we have two kind of a data usage. We have basically a primary use, and we have a secondary use. The primary use is when my data is being used to treat myself. I go to the hospital, I go to the doctor, he takes my data, he uses my data to treat myself for a certain disease or for a certain problem. Is the primary use that we're not going to talk at the moment here. But the secondary use is a researcher wants to build an AI agent to predict my future health. Now, it's definitely, it has a use for me, but it's not used for that. So here is basically the photo for the primary use. I put Portuguese, sorry, I should have put Spain here, but I'm traveling from Luxembourg to Spain. If something bad happens, I go to the hospital, but the problem here is my all data is in Luxembourg. And if I don't speak proper Spanish, and the doctor speaks only good Spanish, and his English is, for some reason, not that communicatable, then we have a problem here. And he has no mechanism at the moment that he can fetch my data from Luxembourg with my permission and get, okay, which allergies I have, which medications I have been taking, what more medications will be needing for me. So these are the challenges that EHDS will like to address when it will come to basically the primary use or the primary care of the data. That will be through the e-prescription, that will be through the data sharing across the borders, that will be through the standardization. Now, this is basically a lifeline of the data when it comes to the secondary use. It starts from the patient, it goes to the different stages, and when it goes to the different stages, it basically ends again on the patient because it has to give a benefit to the patient. This is what I like to emphasize here, that when you come to basically, when you say, okay, we need a data sharing, we need a data, we have to tell the data subjects or the patients why we need your data, why benefit you will get in the end. This is the only way we can get access to their data, because now they will feel confident that why they need your data, why you need their data, and what benefit in the end they will get. It's a very simple example. If Amazon asks you, give me all of the permissions or give me this XYZ data, I'll deliver your parcel like in 24 hours. Most of the people will be giving all of the information what Amazon will be asking. If something similar, we can convince to the patient that if you'll give this data, we'll take care, we have these technical enablers, but we have these legal safeguards for you, but in the end, you will also be getting these benefit. Then definitely, these are all the safeguards that are basically on the way, unless the data reach to the patient, and unless the data reach to the researchers, and the researchers do the research and make some more innovation, and then innovation leaves to the patient. So these are the three pillars of the project, like a data space for health that I spoke with. On the top, we have a business layer, because there is no ecosystem that can survive without a business model. On the right hand, we have basically the technical, and on the left hand, we have the legals. So legal and technicals both has to come together to enable the business layer, and the business layer then has to basically come to a business model where that's sufficient for data share, for sustainable data sharing, because these kind of infrastructure needs definitely a sustainable models to run. Currently, these models are basically running on some the European fundings or some other fundings, but once those fundings runs out, we need to have a business model. So these are the three things that we are doing actually in a tiny country of Luxembourg to enable technical, legal, and business challenges when it comes to the data sharing by developing a data space. So this is the usual process that we have actually identified when it comes to the data sharing for the secondary use. The researchers identify its needs. It comes to some place, search for the data, what it needs. It has to file a data access request that it needs to, he or she wants to access the data. Once the access got approved, he needs to have an ethical approval. If he is using the human data, ethical approval is granted, then he basically needs to have make a data access request to the data access committee. They have to check the purpose for which the data is needed. Once that's granted, he can get access to the data in a secure processing environment. So this is the process that we have designed, and now we are actually simplifying and automating those processes through in Data Space for Health. Okay, so these are the basically technical enablers that we are basically using to build the platform. So our platform has 4 major pillars. There's identity and trust. There's the federated catalog. There's the compliance, how to ensure basically the compliance with the local and the European laws. And we have basically the data access mechanism. We are enabling that the data access that is made actually followed all the legals and local and international data sharing requirements. And this is basically how we are supporting the initiative of a European health data space. This is what we are contributing at the moment in Luxembourg to gain more knowledge or to gain more insights that how in the future data space, European health data space can look like, and how actually it will act. So this project is basically kind of a simulation or stimulation of that the larger picture that you will see like in 2029 or later, because the European health data space are the regulations, and it has to go one way or another. And we are testing actually that how it will look like in Luxembourg, so that when it comes to the implementation, it should be pretty easy, not the straightforward, but pretty easy for the stakeholders to embrace the change. So this is the basically technical, this is the basically layered architecture that in the project that we are basically building. On the bottom, you can see the technical artifacts. In the middle, we have basically the legal or the business artifacts, and on the top, basically what user gets actually in the end. So we also did some of basically strategy insight, that how this whole, as I say, basically we have legal, we have technical, and now this is the business one, that how we will map basically the business strategy in the project. And what we are basically thinking for advance, we are trying to connect now basically Europe and through Luxembourg and Japan. So we are basically working on another extension of this project. For that, we have submitted the request. We will be basically connecting 2 data spaces, one in basically Luxembourg and one in Japan. And we'll be testing the use case that how basically the compliances in 2 countries and the technical infrastructures in 2 countries can work together. So these are some of the photos of the team. Definitely, I only spoke here. I didn't do all the work, but the team here behind is basically some of folks are basically in Japan. Few colleagues are here as well, and the Luxembourgish team is also working on this project. So yeah, you can definitely look into our LinkedIn or WhatsApp. So yeah, thank you very much.